I got involved with this issue in a search of one of my son's severe learning impairments and dyslexia. I was looking for possible causes. I was an anti-fluoridation, I was in pro-fluoridation. I didn't even vote in the earlier council vote referendum in Hamilton a few years ago. But now that I've looked at the science, I'm horrified at what we don't know, and how I can read papers, I can read the literature and realise how epidemiological studies can be used to show anything and how some are very poor. Fluoride is not an essential element for human growth and development and for most organisms in the environment. That's from the recent Scientific Committee on Health and Environmental Risks published earlier this year, a consortium of experts from the European Union. There are different types of fluoride in water. Natural, artificial. They're not the same, although the Ministry of Health says they are the same. Natural components are predominantly calcium-based, and the main one's calcium fluoride. Calcium makes the biggest difference. The artificial ones, sodium fluoride and hydroferrosic acid and fluorosilicates, they are man-made, usually from industrial waste products or chemical industrial reactions. High phosphate fertilizer, industry. There's a big difference in the toxicity, and that's if you look at this thing called an acute toxicity, there's the lethal dose, LD50. That's where you have test organisms, you expose them to these particular substances and increase the dose, and the dose that you get for a certain weight, where 50% of them die, it's called the LD50. If you look on the left, for naturally occurring calcium fluoride, it's 3,750 milligrams per kilo, as opposed to the artificial synthetic man-made ones, 125 milligrams per kilo. There's a big difference. And that difference is mainly due to calcium and the way calcium acts. And in the body, interference of calcium signaling at the smallest cellular level has major influences on fluorine metabolism. And that's why there's a big difference. The artificial ones are far more toxic and totally different. One of the biggest problems is this concept of margin of safety. And if you look at the two vehicles passing under that bridge, the margin of safety for the second vehicle is actually insufficient, considering the benefit of getting through. And what they ignore, and most of these reviews ignore, this. There's consistent failure to address the most vulnerable subgroups. The group of people most likely to get harmed, the one where that margin of safety is really, really, really narrow. And I've listed some: pregnant mothers with medical conditions, for example, those with gestational diabetes or subclinical hypothyroidism. That means they have a condition, they don't even know about it. Or they may have iodine deficiency. New Zealand has a problem. Only recently have midwives started giving pregnant women iodine supplements with their folic acid. How many generations of Kiwi women that have subclinical or suboptimal iodine levels that have been exposed to fluoridated water in pregnancy? That's a concern. About 2.5% of women may have hypothyroidism in pregnancy and not know about it, and about 5 to 10% have what's called postpartum thyroid dysfunction, where they may have low levels of thyroid. You expose those women to fluoridated water, their kids are going to end up with long-term intellectual deficits that'll mean that their optimal performance in life is reduced. You can't get back, it's irreversible. And you're exposing all these pregnant women and their unborn children to this risk. It's really quite a concern. What are the most critical periods for fluoride exposure? Pregnancy and postnatally, after birth. And who doesn't breastfeed? Unfortunately, Maori and Pacific Islanders give up more than others. This is from the Ministry of Health 2007, fully and exclusively breastfeed. Look at 6 weeks, 58% of Maori babies are being breastfed, but at 6 months, only 17%. So that means it must be formula fed. They're going to be the ones most exposed. And so I'm part Samoan, my Pacific Island relatives also the same sort of problem. 18% by 6 months. At birth, you know, within 6 weeks, 58% only of Maori women are breastfeeding, and only 53% Pacific Island women. 50% of our young New Zealand children, particularly Maori Pacific Island, are being exposed to a dangerous chemical that you've added to the water. Scary. Scary. The other thing too was there was a study by Cressy in 2010, and he basically found New Zealand infants fully formula fed on formula prepared with optimally fluoridated water, 0.7 to 1 milligram per litre, have a high probability of exceeding the upper limit for fluoride and are at an increased risk of dental fluorosis. If they're at an increased risk of dental fluorosis, they're at an increased risk of other body sites being affected. Are formula-fed babies and infants overdosed at 0.7 milligrams per litre hydrofluorosilicic acid concentration? But basically, looking at the average weight and the average volume of formula that a newborn would have, it's about 6.8 times that amount for dental fluorosis. That's the dose they're getting. It's incredibly high. And 6-month-old, it's about 5 times. This is scary. Excessive dose for thyroid function. From the National Research Council 2006, they wrote when thyroid would be affected by levels of fluoride. So if you've got inadequate iodine, the safe level is 0.01 to 0.03 milligrams per kilogram per day. These kids are getting sufficient dosages to interfere with their thyroid function. That is going to have serious implications which have not been addressed by the Ministry of Health. That original diagram I showed you with the synthetic and natural occurring fluorides, the hydrofluorosilicic acid is right at the same toxicity as arsenic and lead. The mechanisms of how it interacts with calcium is basically very similar for lead, arsenic and fluoride. And those calcium signal communication breakdowns lead to a lot of these problems. So we've got big problems on our hand. We've been dumbing down our nation for too long. We should be looking at nutritional reasons to improve the health of all our most vulnerable populations. And the study, and, you know, this is immune function. Better nutrition is a better answer than fluoridated water. It doesn't compare the risks. There's no margin of safety issues. And you have a responsibility. We've had 50 years of experimentation around the world and decades in certain parts of New Zealand. And if they don't come up with that data, the safety data, this is an experiment. It's unethical from the medical perspective. I look at my patients before I prescribe a medication and look at the effects and take into account any vulnerabilities, impaired kidney function, liver damage, and then I adjust the dose. One dose does not fit everyone, and the most vulnerable individuals cannot be allowed to be subject to this experiment. Thank you.